Alright, you bunch of necks, this might be too late for some of you, but for the rest of you who got a quiz postponed or some other circumstances, this is an overview of Chapter 10, or otherwise known as Andrew Jackson's chapter. So basically what happened after he got elected was, first off, we got a new thing introduced. It's called a spoil system. You know, in RPGs, you beat the battle, you get XP, you get gold, you know, all sorts of cool shit. Well, Jackson's like, alright, I just won the battle, to the victor goes the spoils. And so he fired everybody in the federal government and replaced them with shittier people, which, you know, kind of sucked, but to the victor go the spoils. And so, throughout his presidency, he wanted to basically say the presidency can do whatever the fuck it wants, whenever it fucking wants to. Don't give a fuck about none of these other two branches and like checks and balances or shit. And he also actually wanted to preserve the union despite his states' rights views as well. So, you know, he took a hardline stance against nullification and shit. It's pretty crazy. He also hated both tariffs and the bank. So we're going to see how he does that later. And also, and finally, he hates Indians. So, comes up with this Indian Removal Act so he can get all the Indians out of the Georgia's lands for all the white people to take it, right? And so, you know, at this point, they're the 5 civilized tribes. The Cherokees, the Chickasaws, the Choctaws, the Creeks, and the Seminoles. So, and they, you know, they've been doing pretty well for themselves. You know, Cherokees had even created their own written language by this guy named Sequoyah. It was pretty crazy. But, you know, that all ended when Jackson went like, I fucking hate Indians. I'm gonna get rid of them with this Indian Removal Act. And so he did. And after a bunch of fights, and, like, the Supreme Court saying, hey, you can't do that, and Jackson saying, John Marshall has made his decision, now let him enforce it. And then, you know, all the Indians eventually got kicked out. Either, you know, peacefully or with violence. You know. And, you know, so the Cherokees had their Trail of Tears thing in 1937, or 1938. This was, ironically, after Jackson's presidency, but it was in Martin Van Buren's presidency, so it was, like, same kind of deal, right? Although the Seminoles never really left. They just kind of disappeared into the woods and killed anything that walked inside, so that was also a thing. Yeah. And they all got moved to the west to Oklahoma, where there were already Indian tribes. Funnily enough, also Indian tribes who were already kicked out to the west. And, like, that was pretty bad. Like, the Sac and Fox tribes basically got annihilated by the hostile Indian tribes to the west, and when they tried to come back east, the white people to the east. So, sucks for the Indians. Next thing on Jackson's kill list is the Bank of the United States, because despite, like, all the rich people and, like, other people who supported the economy going, like, the bank is fine, Jackson's like, no, this is unconstitutional, this is bullshit, and I hate banks, I'm going to kill it. So even though this guy named Nicholas Biddle, like, made it pretty okay and, like, have and made the nation have, you know, bigger credit and, like, a stable currency and all sorts of cool stuff, Jackson went like, go fuck yourself. Vetoed the charter and said to his partner, Martin Van Buren, the bank, Mr. Van Buren, is trying to kill me, but I will kill it. And so he did. After a bunch of what was it? He took all the money, all the federal money from the bank and put them into a bunch of pet banks. Wink, wink, that might be a vocabulary thing you gotta know. Put them into a bunch of pet banks that were in some other states. And then basically said, the bank can go fuck itself. And so it died. Yeah. And also, right after Jackson left office, coincidentally enough, there was a financial panic with other central bank to, you know, regulate currency and things like that. Kinda sucked. Oh, and eventually, one of his partners, Mr. John C. Calhoun, kind of just went against Jackson in general. Because, like, he became, like, states' rights or everything. We should be able to secede. This is just this is a union, but, like, we can pull out whenever we want. Because, like, fuck you, I can do whatever I want. Don't gotta swear allegiance to no federal government. Don't need no federal government to take care of me and my slaves. And so, one of the first things between them was this Peggy Eaton affair where, like, a secretary married a woman whose husband recently died, and so the Calhouns were like, that's too soon, and they all, along with a bunch of other wives in the cabinet, all kind of shunned Peggy Eaton, and Jackson was like, that's such bullshit. You're bullshit. This is stupid. And so, also, that there was a tariff that was still a thing, and South Carolina was like, I don't like that shit. That takes away money from me after I need it to, control all my slaves, where the population of South Carolina was, like, over 50% slaves. So, like, shit. And, so Calhoun's like, you know what? States should be able to nullify anything the federal government sends up. 'Cause we said that we would agree to this, so we can say we're not gonna agree to this shit. So you can go take your tariff and go fuck yourself. And so, even though, true, we didn't make a tariff of abomination, since it was literally shit for everybody, because it was originally going to protect industries in the north, but then Martin Van Buren and his allies modified it, so it was just shit for everybody, instead of just kind of shit for the south. So, eventually, it led to the part where, at this one banquet, Jackson, they were all offering up toasts, and Jackson's like, our union, it must be preserved. And Calhoun's like, shit, the union, next to our liberty, the most dear. May we always remember that it can only be preserved by respecting the rights of the states. And so, at this point, like, Calhoun and Jackson just kind of hate each other. And so, remember that guy, John Quincy Adams, that was a really shit president? Well, now he's part of Congress, and he's actually useful now. And so he made a new tariff that would replace the tariff of abominations that was, like, better and shit. It would, like, actually protect the industries that needed protecting, and, like, reduce tariffs on shit that the slave states wanted. And so, most of the South went like, that works. And South Carolina's like, no, fuck you. I'm not gonna pay you jack shit. And eventually, they went like, I'm gonna declare both of these tariffs unconstitutional, and I'm gonna get a fucking army. And then Jackson is like, no, I don't think so, bitch. And so, eventually, Henry Clay made another tariff that was even better in South Carolina's eyes. And then they went up to them and were like, alright, you don't accept this shit, there's gonna be fucking war. You're not gonna, commit treason against us. And South Carolina, like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna backpedal on that real fast. And so, in the end, Jackson technically won in the nullification battle. You don't nullify shit. But South Carolina didn't exactly admit defeat, being with the law saying anybody holding state office had to swear loyalty to South Carolina first before the U.S. So, like, yeah. But enough about Jackson. Let's talk about the Second Great Awakening. So there's this guy, a lawyer named Charles G. Finney, and he wants to, he wants to revive religion because he didn't like being an attorney. And so he basically just, argued his case for religion using wit and wisdom. Ooh, fancy. And, revived faith in all of New York, even creating a burned over district in New York. Listen to that, air quotes. burned over district in New York because there was such a flame of religious revival and faith, and that was pretty cool. And like, I need to mute my phone during recordings. This was poorly thought out. Okay, my bad. But yeah, and so he like started revivals in New York, and there's this other guy named Lehman Beecher that went like, all right, if we can't get the government to directly support our religions, we'll just, get together and make religion better, and like combine all the religions to come together and promote more religion and like everybody be Christian. It was like, oh shit, whoa. And so he got a bunch of Christian denominations together, and together they like promoted Christianity and revived religion. It's pretty cool. And so it basically just like helped create a lot of shit, like education, like school systems, and like helped like strengthen religious influence in politics and stuff. And more importantly, this is gonna lead to more reform movements popping up. Like, gotta think. Okay. And so, in the North, with this religious revival meant a lot of faith put into the abolitionist cause, because like clearly can't do that. Can't have slavery if you're gonna be a moral good moral Christian. Can't have that in your good Christian homes, right? And so that was one movement, and then there's also the women's rights movement, and there's also that prison and asylum movement where they changed prisons from like terrible places to slightly less shittier places, where they tried to re-educate the peoples before they got out of prison, and they made asylums not like prisons, but instead places where they could actually treat people. Spearhead, like in Massachusetts, that was spearheaded by a woman named Dorothea Dix, because insane people were just like chained up and stuff. That was pretty bad. Yeah. So, this also led to a lot of utopia communities popping up, trying to do shit. And so, like, there was these people called the Shakers that, like, shook. So they're like Quakers, but they didn't have sex. And so, they were pretty popular, but there's also the fact that they didn't have sex. So, that wasn't ever going to last too long. And they also owned shit in the common, like, they were a communist society, and so, like, in good old capitalist America, this wasn't too popular with a lot of people. There's also this, and that was spearheaded by a person named Mother Ann Lee. Then there's this guy named John Humphrey Noyes with his Oneida community. I don't know how to pronounce it. And so basically it went like, why don't we just have sex with anyone and not be limited to monogamy? Now see, this is against everybody else's ideas at the time, so eventually that pretty much fell apart. Although they did sell silverware to support their community, and that silverware business, continued on past the people just wanting to have like sex with whoever the fuck they wanted. There's also this place called started by this guy named Robert Owen with a New Harmony community, because he wanted to put that universal welfare into practice, but it failed because they couldn't make money. So sucks. And there's also this guy named Joseph Smith who made the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints, otherwise known as the Mormons, who would eventually be led by Brigham Young, because Joseph Smith and his brother gets killed because they did polygamy, and as we saw with Oneida, having more than one sexual partner, that's not a good thing. So that happened. Yeah. And so they moved to Utah, and then eventually when the United States caught up to Utah, they went like, fine, we'll get rid of polygamy. And so they were like the most successful of the many different religious utopia things to pop up. And there's also this thing called transcendentalism. I'm not exactly sure what it is. I'm gonna be honest. It was basically like, I don't know. I'm really not quite sure what it is. But it led to it. But it was created by a guy named Ralph Waldo Emerson, and it eventually led. It eventually led to this place called the Brick Farm being made, where like people were gonna be equal, men and women. But then they failed because nobody knew how to farm anything, so that didn't really work. But now public education becomes a thing, and like a person named Catherine Beecher, daughter of that Lyman Beecher from earlier, promoted like women becoming teachers, because obviously since they teach their own children, why can't they teach other children? And so that's a thing now. And they also made like public schools, and they made standards for those schools, and like they made it so people would pay taxes to fund these schools, and that was kind of cool. Although since these were all headed by Protestants, all the Roman Catholic people were like, why the fuck does your textbook say that we're deceitful, immoral bastards? And then the Protestants are just like, 'cause you are, maybe, I don't know, I didn't say that, but I don't give a shit. So yeah, that sucked. But yeah, and so the new structures for schooling were led by a guy named Horace Mann. So yeah, boom. And there's also this guy from this publishing house called of Truman and Smith that made this thing called a McGuffey's Reader. Like, it taught people how to read and write in American English. And so, it basically made our nation more literate. That's everything you should know about chapter 10 and stuff. Have fun, and if you've already taken the quiz, sucks. But I was dealing with some stuff before last time when you should have taken the quiz, so I'm sorry about that and stuff. Good night.